This is an ad hoc committee that's been called, asked for by the mayor in regards to a public utility problem at 5 Lakeside Road. And I am Fred Visconti, chairman of the committee. Also have with me on the committee is Councilman Greg Seabury and Councilwoman Mary Tycoons. Also in attendance today is David Day from Public Utility, Scott Ferguson, tax collector, Corporation Counsel Les Pinter, and Councilman Perkins. Yeah. And members of the public. We have received, and I believe all of our members of the committee have information from both the public utility people and also from the tax collector. So, for the record, Mayor Boughton is present. I think what I'd like to do is just get a quick rundown from David Day from Public Utility as to why we're here today.
Well, we have a complaint concern about a high water meter reading at 5 Lakeside Road. And I sent out a summary of the facts in an email to Antonio Iadarola, which I'd like to just breeze over here. These are the facts that I'm aware of about this high water bill. On November 17th, 06, as part of our meter change-out program, we installed a new water meter at this residence, 5 Lakeside Road. Now, on a couple months later, approximately 2 months later, January 24th, 07, that was the date of the quarterly meter read that revealed a high water usage. The 4 quarters, and what it revealed was they were averaging about 1,650 gallons per day, which is indicative of a leak. Now, the 4 quarters prior to that, they averaged 400 to 450 gallons a day. So a year prior to that, they were averaging that. And then we put a new meter in, and then the 9 quarters since that high read, they're back to their historical use of between a low of 250 gallons per day to a high of 388 gallons per day. So we feel that the water meter is correct and that the water went through the meter, so we have to charge them for that.
Any questions from council people?
Yeah, I've got a first question. If this was David, if this was indicative of a leak, was a leak found?
Well, we did, historically, we do conduct water waste surveys, and what people need to understand is those are basically a snapshot. It's not a whole movie. So we can show up and we may find a running toilet and say, hey, that may be the subject of your leak. I think a wastewater survey was done when this was alerted to us, and I don't believe anything was found at that time. However, back in March of 03, a wastewater survey was done, and in our files it indicated there was a running toilet. So it very well could have been, that's what we're guessing, something was running.
But that wasn't during the period, Mr. Chairman, of the dispute?
That is correct.
Not during
No, that was a couple of years ago.
So, if I can follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
So, as we sit here right now, we don't know, we can't pinpoint what the leak was.
We can't, no, I can't. I mean, all we can rely on is there was a brand new meter installed, which is certified and tested for accuracy 2 months before this high read took place. And what I can tell you is, and I've been, since my 5 years here, we've had these situations come up, and I've investigated them thoroughly. And what we find is our water meters are a mechanical reading device. And what we found through many discussions with the meter manufacturers are water meters, these mechanical devices, typically do not register fast. And if they were to register fast and break, they would stay in that condition. It doesn't register fast and then go back. And over time, they typically slow down. But what you have here is a brand new meter. So we felt based on the 9 quarters after coming back to normal, there really wasn't a need to test this meter for accuracy. It certainly could be tested, but again, meters don't fail and then correct themselves.
Right.
Mayor?
I think, Mr. Chairman, just to give you a sense of why we're here. With your indulgence and the committee's indulgence, I'd like Mrs. Negri or a representative just sort of describe what the situation is and what their take on it is. But first of all, there's no mechanism within our code of ordinances that allows the city to make an adjustment without either the consent of the council or without some kind of finding from our superintendent of public utilities. And this is one of those kind of gray areas in the sense that we didn't find a definitive leak to say, oh, aha, it's your toilet, or it's the running faucet, that's why you use so much water. It kind of leaves us in a position where I think Mrs. Negri makes certainly has an interesting point to this. And also there's an issue with the billing, and the issue with the billing is that she disputes this quarter of the usage. She does not dispute the subsequent quarters. However, our tax collector will not let you pay, for example, your subsequent bills, right, and say, look, I'm going to pay this quarter because it seems okay to me, but I'm not paying the previous one because it's in dispute. You can't pay anything unless you pay the whole thing off. So the reason her bill is so high, one of the reasons is that there's interest tacked on to subsequent payments and to the usage, and she doesn't dispute that, and she's willing to pay that, obviously. But that's part of the problem, why the bill kept escalating. And at this point, since my hands are really tied, and really David's hands are tied, that's why we're here today, and I just think it would be helpful to hear from Mrs. Negri and her daughter.
So before I call on Mrs. Negri, have any other questions from the council members?
No, not yet.
If I may, Corporation Council, what was the leeway here? I know the mayor explained some, as far as trying to do something here.
Well, you have, it sounds like you have a report that's fairly, that David has done a review of the situation, but perhaps not entirely, because I guess there's a gap of time somewhere in there between tying the leak, the source of the leak or the cause of the leak, to the time period in question.
That's right.
Right?
That's correct.
Is that?
The leak that was found was 2 years prior to the period that's in dispute. There really is,
Oh,
they're
sure.
surmising because there was a leak once a couple of years ago that it must have been the same toilet, but when they went there, that toilet wasn't running.
Right.
5 years previous.
5 years.
He said 03.
Okay.
I mean, largely, as the mayor said before, that the superintendent of public utilities has some fairly wide discretion in reviewing, examining, making a determination on these subjects. There is some provision in the Code of Ordinances for the Common Council to get a report from the superintendent of public utilities on a matter like this. So there is some room for the council to consider making an adjustment here. But you've got to be comfortable that there's a report from the superintendent that's final. So if you feel that you need some additional information to make a decision, and if you want him to go back and get your final report and meet again, then that you can do that if you don't have enough information today.
Okay, so then a lot of what our decision is going to be on today would be to perhaps go back to David and have him make a final report, which we could then give to the council for approval one way or the other. Is that what
Or just leave it up to the discretion.
Or just leave it up to the
You can leave it at his discretion under the ordinances that he can make his final decision based upon your instructions.
Okay. If I may, Mr. Negri, normally the public is not allowed to speak, but if you feel that you have something that is totally different from what we already have here, I can allow you a couple minutes to speak.
They told me I wasn't.
You don't have to be Daniel
gonna
Webster.
speak.
Just explain the
Okay.
issue with the meter,
Yeah.
Mrs. Negri.
Well,
That's, go ahead.
To have a high exorbitant bill like that, we would have to be filling Mr. Green's swimming pool about 3 times. And like David said, if they found a leak in '03, which was 5 years previous, it doesn't fix itself. He's saying the meters don't fix themselves. Now, if the bill went down the next occurring months, a leak wouldn't fix itself. We'd have a higher bill the next couple of months also. So we're kind of on even playing ground here. It's up to you to determine a fair and negotiable price that would determine how much they would pay, but what the bill was exorbitant. And plus, my mother was in a nursing home at the time. The only person that was home was my father, who's disabled. So it's an impossibility, and we can't prove, the meter or whatever. It's
Mr. Chairman, what about the number on the metering? Mrs. Negri had mentioned something about the setting on the new meter.
Well, they said that the meter, because you did send someone up, and he specifically told me that the meter's supposed to start at 0, 0, 0, 0, 4 zeros. The meter started at 0, 1, 0, 0.
Okay, thank you. Dave, is that something we could look at, or?
I can look into that, that's correct.
What would be interesting, Mr. Chairman, to see is if you took the start of the meter plus what the measured usage was in previous months, and does that total out to what the bill, you follow me?
Yep.
So, in other words, if she's saying the meter started at 0, 1, 0, 0, and then you would add that to what a typical quarter would be, does that come close to what that 1 quarter bill was? To see if that had any impact at all on the reading.
I can certainly look at these reads again, we'll double check them, we'll triple check them.
Very good. Scott, we're at a certain point as far as dollar-wise goes. Is that going to continue until something is done here?
You can't stop interest by law.
If there was some resolution by the council, obviously, again, Mrs. Negri does not dispute the subsequent bills, but obviously, I just think it's a little heavy-handed for the city to, when somebody's disputing their bill, then not let you come in and pay anymore, and then start whacking you with interest on top of that. I mean, does the council have some discretion related to the interest?
If the council decides to resolve this issue at large, they can adjust the interest through the back door, if you will, by adjusting some off the principal
Okay,
balance
do it that way.
and leave the interest that's paid, because then you don't run into the problem Scott explains.
And Scott's hands are tied by statute, just so.
Did they say that
Could I just have some- Could you clear that one up again for me as far as the interest rate? I got two.
Yeah.
Well, let's
Scott,
say,
you want to do it?
well, let me just, and just correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but let's, because we do run into this a lot. Let's say you get a bill and you dispute the bill. Say, look, this seems way too high, I want these guys to come out, I'm not gonna pay that. And in this case, I've been talking to Mrs. Negri and the Department of Public Utilities since 2007, okay? So we don't allow you to come in and pay the next bill and the next bill and the next bill. You have to pay the whole thing off. And then you can't get a credit, right, Dave? If it's determined later on that there's a problem.
Yes.
You can't go back and get a credit, but since she hasn't paid, now she, because that bill wasn't resolved one way or another, then there's been interest tacked onto each subsequent bill along with the principal. And so it's escalated pretty hard. What's the total dollar figure now? It's about $4,000 or $5,000?
$2,750.
2,000
Okay.
something.
$2,700.
And you were just suggesting what?
Well, I would, it seems, I understand why the policy is there, but it seems a little heavy-handed that in this case, when you're disputing a bill, we won't take a payment for a subsequent bill. You have to go back and pay the original disputed bill. And I know why we do it, because most times it's not a Mrs. Negri, it's a big corporation, and you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. And 99% of the time on these water leak cases, David and his team usually, we track it down and we can pinpoint, yeah, it was that toilet was running for 4 days, man, and that's why you ran it. In this case, it's sort of it's been a real thorn, I think, in everybody's side, and we like to collect our money too, the money that is due to us, which he's willing to pay.
Scott, do you have anything?
No, it's true, you have to apply the payment to the oldest bill.
Okay.
So if she chose to make payments, it would have paid off from the disputed bill forward. Would have lowered the interest over time, but it's true, you can't pay subsequent. It has to be applied to the oldest balance.
It's a good policy, Mr. Chairman, I'm not disputing it, and because what happens is you'll get way behind with a lot of big customers easily. So I'm not disputing that, but sometimes with some of our residents, they get sort of caught in the middle here, and that's one of the issues.
Les, anything else from your viewpoint?
If this is a settlement of a claim, which you can argue that it is, you have the leeway to do what was just suggested, which is to adjust the billing in a manner which you perceive as a committee recommending that to the council that settles the issues at large, so that Scott, as the tax collector, doesn't have the issue with the waiving the interest, which you can't do, but you would be able to waive that in the context of the dollar amount that you're suggesting this be settled at, subject to Dave's final report, whatever form that is, whatever he checks at the end. in that context is where you have the authority you have to do something, including the payment of the interest, but adjusting a portion of it out to the principal.
And I guess, Mr. Chairman, if I might just interject, just thinking about this is why it's such a bizarre situation. If we had gone in and found a leak, hose leaking, whatever, and the leak is turned off, then that explains why your rate would drop down to where you were in the past. But since we really couldn't pinpoint it, why did her usage drop so dramatically in the subsequent months, particularly because they weren't in the house? Just a thought. It's kind of one of those gray areas.
There definitely is a drop in the usage after the repair was made. That's really perplexing to myself also.
And our new meters are much more accurate.
New
So we
meters.
really actually would expect an increase.
When there are problems with these meters, what are the problems that affect them?
We leave it up to Mr. Day.
Well, I mean, typically in cases like that, we didn't have your meter tested. We could have it tested just to double check, but we felt because it was only 2 months old and it's certified to be accurate, and then based on the past quarters going back, that it still is accurate.
Right.
And we basically, all you can do is test the meter, and what they do is they take that meter and they test it at 3 different flows.
Right.
They'll test it at 15 gallons a minute, 2 gallons a minute, and 1/4 gallons a minute. And they'll say, okay, it should be in the 98% range, all right? And they'll see if it's in that range. And typically what we find is that the older meters tend to be running slower, which means we're not registering all the water we should be.
So when there is a faulty meter, I'm sure there is, because as mechanics,
It's a mechanical device, and I've interviewed many, and actually I have written information from Neptune Technology, one of the meter manufacturers, and they say these mechanical devices over time slow down. They don't speed up, and if they were to somehow speed up, they would stay in that failed condition.
so basically it's like taking a car off of a lot after you just bought it and you have a lemon. This could be the same thing.
Well, it could, but the fact that it went back to the regular flows. I mean, we could certainly test it, and see. I mean, I also equate it to an electric meter. If you leave for a week and your lights and air conditioning are on, you still have electricity flowing, and unfortunately, you got to pay that bill. If there was a leak here you weren't aware of, that when you came back to live in the house, you corrected and didn't know it, maybe a running toilet. What's tough is the neighborhood you live in. 1,650 gallons a day, it's about a gallon a minute. So if you had something leaking that you weren't home and aware of, we've seen these things happen. Now what's unfortunate about a wastewater survey, it is a snapshot, so it's hit or miss. And I say that because a lot of people think, well, you did a wastewater survey, you didn't find anything. Well, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. That's just something we do to try to help find out what happened. Our main thing is, does the meter work? And if the meter works, the water went through the meter, and if we're confident the meter works, then we have to bill you for it. That's the difficult part, on our part. We try to find out what happened with you, but...
But when you can't find out, hypothetically, you're not going to, base it on something that you found 5 years ago. It would be like blaming someone.
No.
It would be almost like somebody, you're guilty before you're proven.
I brought that up to say, we did a waste survey and we found a leaky toilet a while back. If they hadn't corrected it, then it could be a source.
But then it would have continued leaking, but it didn't. So we're both on, even ground there where we don't know. It's a mystery.
Well, that being said, there's a mystery of what happened to the water, but in our eyes, we know it went through the meter. So we have to charge for it. That's the difficult part. I mean, the one thing I can do is test this meter, which was brand new 2 years ago.
But if the meter is running,
Fine now. You should have tested it when you had the
we
problem.
should have did it a year ago.
Yeah, it's not really, when you had the problem, you should have tested it.
Well, and that's what I said before, is meters don't fail and then correct themselves.
This might be the one that did.
I certainly appreciate your questions, because once I got this job, I was asked these time and time again, and we really researched this, and this is what we found out.
Right.
Just one quick lesson. if we were to do something, and have David go back and do a whole case study on this, and he found whatever he found, and came up with some kind of a settlement here, one way or the other, does that have to come back to the common council? Or?
You can just have it settled based upon what you authorize them to do now, and just have them report back to the council, that here's what happened. Or you can bring it back to the committee if you want. That's your call. If you want to see it again, you can see it again.
My suggestion, Mr. Chairman, I think I think the problem we have is precedent setting, and I don't want to see a set of precedent where every dispute comes before the council.
Exactly.
Today, we pay him to help resolve this, but I think we would like him to look at this a little bit more and see if there's anything that can be done. I think we can work on the side of the interest. The latitude is the subsequent billing, I guess is what I'm concerned with that.
Yeah. Well, in order to, yeah,
Or
for the
work on
interest.
the principle down, however you see. Maybe Mr. Pinter and Mr.
So if he were to come back, if Dave comes back with a report, whatever that report may say, dollar-wise or whatever it may be, it could be worked through perhaps Corporation Council with Scott and
That's right.
and without having to come back to the common council.
That way you and I are.
Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion?
Wow,
If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'm sure you will look at me. Doing that.
You can ask the Corporation Council or the mayor.
Greg already has this in mind,
I don't know if I do.
You got it.
Can I'll ask a question that
Sure.
I may through the
Yes.
chair. Just to make it crystal clear. If at some point we do make an adjustment, it can only come off the principal, cannot come off the interest bill stays, correct?
Correct.
That's correct.
Otherwise you drive Scott crazy.
Poor guy.
The principal portion of the bill. Oh,
Councilman Seaver.
Okay, here we'll give it first shot. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to ask for a report from the Superintendent of Public Utilities to determine specifically, way too fast now?
you have my little.
Okay, to determine specifically if all readings of the water meter at 5 Lakeside Avenue are accurate, and to have the meter tested, and to have the superintendent, tax collector, and corporation council to meet to resolve questions of interest in the bill as a whole.
Did you say and then report back to the council?
And then report, yeah, we'll write that next line, and then to report back to the council.
The council or the committee?
Council.
No, the committee. No.
To report back.
Well, I think we can dispose of this right now, so.
Right.
You want him to put it in his monthly report?
Just put it as one.
Yeah.
Is that,
That'll-
you can say.
I really don't think it has to come back either to us or the council.
Right,
you
right.
know.
It's in the report.
And to include it in his monthly report.
Oh, well, you said interest, are we dealing with the principal or the interest on this?
That's not like the one,
The only way you can deal with the interest is to deal with the principal.
yeah, but that's, we gotta worry about Scott, that's what we have.
Okay.
What was I saying? Why do we have to pay the interest on that?
It's a long bill.
Well,
No, no,
I want
no,
to read
please.
it again, just for.
Fine.
And then I have that one.
Want me to read again?
Yes, please.
Excuse me, I'd like to make a motion to ask for a report from the Superintendent of Public Utilities to determine specifically if all readings of the water meter at 5 Lakeside Avenue are accurate, and have the meter tested, and then to have the superintendent, the tax collector, and corporation council meet to resolve any questions of interest and the bill as a whole, and to include this information in the monthly report provided by the superintendent of public utilities.
There's a second.
Second, yeah.
Discussion.
None for me.
just a clarification thing. David, you said if the meter is found to be accurate, then the Negris would have to pay for the testing, and if the city, if we found that it was inaccurate, then the city pays for the meter testing?
That's typically how we handle it.
Okay, I guess I just wanted you to also be aware that if it's found to be fine, then they're responsible for the money, for the testing of the meter.
Yeah, it's a $55 test.
Just wanted to make sure that we're aware of that.
There being no further discussion, I'll try your minds on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Being no one opposed, motion passed unanimously. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion to adjourn is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you for coming.
Yep.
All right.